Ethan's mind buzzed as he walked. Every step he took on the gravel road toward town was careful, calculated. He kept glancing sideways at the wolf, who limped along just a few feet behind him. It still hadn't made a sound. Not a growl, not a bark, just silence and the soft crunch of paws on the road. No one had trained Ethan for something like this. His parents would have never believed it, but something deep inside him, something instinctive, told him this wolf meant no harm. There was a quiet intelligence in its eyes. It wasn't wild in the way movies portrayed wolves. It was watchful, alert, and somehow, it had chosen to follow him. By the time Ethan reached the outskirts of town, the sky was fading into dusky purple. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows over the sidewalk. That's when the first neighbor noticed them. Mrs. Grover, a retired librarian known for her habit of staring out her window with binoculars, gasped as she saw the boy and the wolf walking past her rose bushes. She flung open her screen door and called out, "Ethan Moore, is that what in heaven's name? What is that animal with you?" Ethan didn't stop walking. He gave a quick nod and replied, "I think it's a wolf, ma'am. It's hurt. I found it in the woods." Mrs. Grover blinked, speechless. By then, two middle schoolers on bikes had circled around, their jaws hanging open. One of them even tried to get close, but the wolf stopped and stood still, watching the boy with eyes that warned, not too close. Soon, more people began to gather, peeking from porches and balconies, whispering among themselves. Some reached for their phones, others crossed the street. The sight was surreal. A 17-year-old walking quietly through town with a wild wolf trailing beside him. Ethan didn't speak much. He just kept walking toward the local vet's office, hoping someone there might know what to do. The wolf, still limping but steady, didn't stray, but as Ethan neared the small brick building that housed the veterinary clinic, a voice called out sharply from across the street, "Ethan, stop." He turned to see a girl around his age, sprinting toward him. Her dark braid bounced behind her, and she was wearing a backpack with an embroidered wolf patch stitched onto the side. It was Lila Hart. Lila was quiet, smart, and often kept to herself. She lived with her grandmother on the edge of town and volunteered at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center every weekend. While others gossiped about school dances and part-time jobs, Lila read books about wolves and tracked animal prints in the woods behind her house. Now her face was pale as she stared at the wolf. "Where did you find it?" she asked breathlessly, ignoring the small crowd forming behind her. "In the forest," Ethan replied. "It was caught in a trap. I just think it trusted me." Lila stepped closer, slowly. The wolf stood still, head low, but didn't back away. Her eyes locked onto its leg, and she gasped softly. "I've seen that wolf before," she whispered. I think it's not wild." Ethan stared at her. "What do you mean?" Lila didn't answer right away. She crouched down, extending her hand in a way that showed she had done this before. And then, the wolf did something no one expected. It limped forward and gently pressed its nose against her palm. The onlookers gasped. Even Ethan looked stunned. Lila slowly stood up, eyes wide with realization. "I think this wolf was raised in captivity," she said. "I think it escaped from somewhere, and I know exactly where we need to go." Everyone around them fell silent. In the blink of an eye, what had started as an ordinary walk through the woods had turned into something else entirely, something much deeper, far more mysterious. And Ethan had no idea that this quiet girl with the wolf patch on her bag was about to reveal a truth that had been hidden in their town for years. As the small crowd murmured and whispered around them, Lila turned away from their questions and focused only on the wolf. She wasn't frightened. She wasn't confused. She looked like someone who had just found the missing piece of a puzzle she'd been building for a very long time. Ethan noticed it too. Her hands didn't shake when she touched the animal. Her voice didn't quiver when she spoke. She moved like someone with a purpose, someone who had been waiting for this moment, though she'd never admit it. "I've seen that mark before," she said again, pointing to a faint scar on the wolf's shoulder. "There's a rescue center outside of town, not the one people know about. This one's been shut down for years, officially at least." Ethan frowned. "Are you saying this wolf came from there?" Lila nodded. "I'm almost sure of it. My mom used to work there. She told me they had a special case, a pup taken from the wild, injured and raised under watch. She said it bonded too strongly with people, so they stopped letting the public near it. And then, a few months after she quit, the place shut down completely." Ethan glanced at the wolf, now lying calmly at his feet. "But if it was shut down, how did it end up in the woods?" "That's the part no one talks about," Lila said. "There were rumors that not everything there was legal. Some people said they kept animals longer than they were supposed to. Others thought the place never really closed at all. The street around them was growing quieter. Most of the onlookers had backed away, unsure whether to be amazed or afraid. But Ethan stood firm, and Lila did too. She took a deep breath. "I think we need to go there tonight." Ethan blinked. Now Lila's eyes didn't waver. "Before anyone gets involved, if someone from that old center sees the news or hears about this, they might try to take the wolf back before we understand what's really going on." Ethan hesitated. He had just brought home a wild animal, and now a girl he barely knew was asking him to follow her into a place that supposedly no longer existed. But something about her certainty made it impossible to say no. Okay, he said quietly, let's go. They borrowed Ethan's old bike, and Lila led the way on foot, the wolf staying close beside them like it had done with Ethan. The sun had disappeared completely now, leaving the town bathed in the glow of street lamps and shadows. After 15 minutes of walking through a gravel trail hidden behind tall pine trees, Lila stopped near a crumbling fence, half swallowed by vines and brush. There, she whispered, that's it. Beyond the fence stood a low, metal building, rusted at the edges but still intact. A faded sign near the entrance read, West Ridge Wildlife Rehabilitation closed to public. The chain-link gate had been wrapped with a thick padlock, but Lila didn't even flinch. She pulled out a set of wire cutters from her bag. You came prepared? Ethan asked, half impressed, half surprised. Lila shrugged. I've been waiting to come here since I was 12. The gate clicked open. Inside, the air smelled like dust and stale air. Broken cages and old crates lined the walls. Faded papers were pinned to a board in the corner, and a few rubber gloves still sat on a metal tray near a sink. The place had clearly been abandoned for years, but not completely. There were footprints in the dust, fresh ones, and scratch marks on one of the inner door's long, deep grooves that hadn't been there long. Ethan's heart began to pound. The wolf suddenly growled a low, tense sound that stopped both of them in their tracks. It wasn't directed at them, it was aimed down the dark hallway ahead. Someone or something was still in the building. Lila whispered, I think we're not the first ones here tonight. And in that moment, both of them realized this wasn't just about a wolf anymore. They had stepped into something much bigger, something dangerous. Ethan had never been more aware of his heartbeat. Each step he took inside the old rehabilitation center echoed louder than it should have. Lila walked ahead of him, her flashlight cutting through the darkness, while the wolf stayed pressed close. To her side, its low growl, a constant reminder that they were not alone. The building's silence was thick and natural. Dust floated in the stale air, but the scuff marks in the dirt told a different story. Someone had been here recently, maybe even that day. They reached a heavy metal door at the far end of the hall. It had no label, just a keycard scanner with a dead red light and a rusted handle. Lila examined the scratches along the frame, tracing them with her fingers. This used to be the restricted wing, she said softly. My mom told me this is where they kept the animals that weren't supposed to be seen. Government rescues, endangered species, private donations, no one ever asked about. Ethan swallowed. Donations, Lila nodded. Animals that were captured or taken from questionable sources. Some of them weren't even listed in records. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a thin piece of plastic. I found my mom's old card. If the battery backup still works, this might open it. She slid the card through the scanner. Nothing happened. But then, as if on cue, a mechanical click echoed from inside the wall, and the door creaked open an inch. A gust of cold air rushed out along with a faint smell of antiseptic and something else. Something musty and old. Ethan looked at Lila, and she gave him a slight nod. Together, they pushed the door open. Inside was a narrow corridor with thick glass walls on either side. Behind each wall were old enclosures, some empty, others still containing crates, equipment, and in one case, an overturned water bowl. One glass room had scratch marks on the inside. Another had what looked like fur tangled in the fencing. Ethan stepped closer, then froze. In one of the enclosures sat a photograph, a faded, laminated picture taped to the glass. It showed a younger version of the wolf, just a pup being bottle-fed by a woman wearing a badge that read, West Ridge Wildlife Technician, Megan Hart. That's your mom, Ethan whispered. Lila stared at the photo, her expression unreadable. She never told me they had kept him this long. She said they had released him after rehabilitation, but she must have known. The wolf stepped forward now, standing directly in front of the glass. It stared at the photo, tail still, body tense. There was something sad in the way it stood there, like it remembered. Suddenly, a sharp noise echoed from somewhere deeper inside the building. A door slammed. Ethan turned. Did you hear that? Lila nodded. We're not alone. They moved quickly but quietly, following the source of the sound. The hallway ahead curved slightly, and as they rounded the bend, they stopped short. Standing at the far end was a man in a black jacket, holding a flashlight. He looked up, surprised, and dropped what looked like a clipboard. His face was unfamiliar, but the wolf's reaction was immediate. It bared its teeth and barked a deep guttural warning that filled the corridor. The man backed away a step, clearly not expecting company. You shouldn't be here, he said. Ethan stepped in front of Lila. Who are you? The man hesitated, then said, I'm with the property management company. This building is off limits, but his voice shook slightly, and there was something wrong in his eyes. He wasn't just a property manager. He was lying. Lila's voice cut through the tension. You worked here. You knew the wolf. You were part of this. The man looked ready to run, but the wolf stepped forward, its growl rising again. Then he said something unexpected. You don't understand what they were doing here. This wasn't just a rehab center, it was an experiment. Ethan narrowed his eyes. What kind of experiment? The man didn't answer. Instead, he turned and bolted down the corridor, disappearing through a side door before either of them could react. Leela looked at Ethan. We need to find out what he meant, and fast, before someone tries to erase everything. And just like that, a walk in the woods had led to a secret that was much bigger than either of them imagined. Lila didn't waste a second. As soon as the stranger disappeared, she ran toward the room he'd just left, with Ethan and the wolf close behind. The hallway was tight, the air even colder now, and the walls seemed to absorb every sound. When she pushed open the rusted door, at the end, they found themselves in a dimly lit office still powered by a backup generator humming somewhere. Out of sight, papers were scattered across the desk. A metal cabinet stood open, its drawers hanging unevenly, and in the corner was a monitor flickering softly with static. Ethan shut the door behind them while Leela rushed to the desk. These are activity reports, she whispered, flipping through a folder. This one's dated 3 months ago. That means this place hasn't been abandoned, it's still in use. Ethan picked up one of the pages, his brow furrowed. This says behavioral response, logged subject. Omega-27 responded positively to human interaction post-distillation. That must be the wolf. Leela nodded. They were documenting his behavior. It wasn't just rehab. They were training him, testing how he bonded after being isolated. That's not normal wildlife work. In a locked drawer she forced open with a rusty screwdriver, they found a folder labeled Confidential Omega Files. Inside were photos, reports, and charts tracking the wolf's growth, stress levels, and obedience. One entry stood out. Subject displays unusually high retention of human-based signals. Strong emotional memory, link with primary caregiver. Recommend continued isolation to observe long-term effects of imprinting. Leela's voice was quiet, but full of weight. They didn't want to release him. They wanted to study him like a lab rat. Ethan looked at the wolf, now sitting beside the desk, watching them silently. That's why he followed me. He was used to being around people. He trusted someone. Once, and maybe I reminded him of them. Suddenly, they heard voices. Not just one or two, but multiple footsteps coming from the hallway. Flashlights flickered through the glass, growing closer. They're coming back. Ethan whispered. Leela grabbed the folder. We need to get out of here. If we leave this behind, they'll destroy it. She turned to the side door and slipped into the emergency stairwell, Ethan right behind her. The wolf followed without hesitation. They descended to flights and emerged behind the building in the woods again, hearts racing. Once they were far enough from the center, they collapsed. Near a pile of logs, the forest was quiet again, but their minds were not. Ethan looked at the folder in Lila's hands. Do you think your mom knew what they were doing here? I don't know, Leela admitted. She left so suddenly. One day she was working late, the next she said she was done with wildlife forever. She wouldn't tell me why, but now it makes sense. They sat in silence for a while. The wolf lay curled at their feet, his injured legs still stiff but healing. There was something protective in the way he positioned himself between them and the dark trees, as if guarding them. Lila finally spoke again. We can't bring this to the police. Not yet. If these people were able to keep this hidden for years, they probably have connections. They'll spin it, say we trespassed, say we made it up. Ethan nodded. So what do? We go public, Leela said. But not through the town. We show someone who can't be ignored. A journalist, a wildlife official, someone from outside who will ask the right questions. Ethan looked at her with a mix of admiration and worry. You're serious about this? She nodded. That wolf trusted us. If we walk away now, he'll just disappear again. And whatever they were doing in there, they'll keep doing it. Ethan glanced down at the wolf, who met his eyes with a steady, unblinking stare. We're in this together now, he said, quietly. And though the night had fallen hard around them, neither of them felt alone. By morning, the town of Cold Pines was buzzing. Word had spread fast. Ethan Moore, the quiet boy who walked in the woods, had returned with a wolf. And not just any wolf, but one that had calmly followed him through the town square like a trained companion. The photo someone snapped the night before had already gone viral. But what no one knew yet was what Leela and Ethan had discovered inside the abandoned wildlife center. They met again that morning at the small diner near the edge of town. Lila had stayed up all night, scanning the documents they'd taken, carefully photographing each page and organizing the files onto a flash drive. Ethan brought food for the wolf, who now rested behind the diner under a shaded pine, still favoring his injured leg. Leela's voice was low as she slid the drive across the table. There's enough in here to raise serious questions. If we get this into the right hands, it could expose everything they've been hiding. Ethan looked at her. Are you sure about this? She didn't hesitate. Yes, but we can't do it alone. She had already made contact with someone, an independent wildlife reporter named Sadie Rowan, known for investigating unethical animal treatment cases across the country. Sadie had a reputation for digging deep and asking the questions others avoided. Lila had sent her an anonymous message with one photo and a short note. There's more going on in Cold Pines than anyone knows. I have proof. To their surprise, Sadie replied within the hour. She would be arriving in town that afternoon. While they waited, Ethan took Lila to the woods again. The wolf, now more alert and walking better, stayed close by. They didn't speak much on the trail. The silence between them was comfortable, like the trust slowly growing between them and the animal that had brought their worlds together at a clearing near the creek. Lila stopped and knelt beside the wolf. She reached out and gently scratched behind his ear. He leaned into her touch. I think we should name him, she said softly. He's more than a subject. He's more than an experiment. Ethan smiled. What about Ghost? Lila looked at him curiously, because he came from the past. Ethan nodded, and because people are going to talk about him like a legend. Ghost, she repeated. I like it. When they returned to town later that afternoon, Sadie was already waiting for them outside the local library. She was tall, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. The moment she saw the wolf, her face changed not with fear, but with focus. You weren't exaggerating, she said to Lila. He's stunning. Inside a quiet back room of the library, they showed her everything: photos, reports, maps, and records of questionable animal testing. Sadie took notes quickly, occasionally asking precise questions. Lila explained the layout of the facility, how they found the wolf, and what the stranger had said before running off. Sadie leaned back, her expression unreadable. You've got something big here. If even half of this is legitimate, there could be serious consequences. What do we do next? Ethan asked. Sadie replied, I'll write the story. I'll bring in my contacts at wildlife protection and federal agencies, but I need a few days. If this center was running without oversight, someone powerful was involved. She paused. And that means someone might try to stop this story before it gets out. Outside, the town was quiet. People were still trying to make sense of the wolf, of Ethan's return, and Lila's sudden visibility. But things were about to shift. Lila looked at Ghost, then back at Sadie. Whatever happens next, we won't run from it. And just like that, 3 people and one extraordinary wolf had set a chain reaction into motion, one that would shake Cold Pines to its core. The next 2 days felt like walking on thin ice. Everything looked normal on the surface. Kids went to school. People went to work. The bakery smelled of cinnamon rolls, but under the surface, tension grew like a rising tide. Lila and Ethan kept a low profile. Ghost stayed hidden in the woods, near Ethan's backyard, where they built him a quiet shelter using old fencing and soft blankets. He didn't try to run. He didn't try to leave. It was as if he knew. He was waiting for something. Sadie Rowan, meanwhile, worked quickly. She'd set up in a room at the Pinaview Motel with her laptop, audio recorders, and camera equipment. She interviewed both teens separately, verified the documents, and cross-referenced names from the files. Her voice had gone from curious to serious in less than 24 hours. This wasn't just one wolf, she told them. There were at least 5 listed in the earliest reports. Ghost is the only one who survived long enough to be released or maybe escaped. Ethan leaned forward. What happened to the others? Sadie hesitated. The documents use words like removed and decommissioned, but those terms are vague. Too vague. Lila clenched her jaw. They were killed. Sadie didn't answer, but the silence confirmed everything they feared. Then came the warning signs. On the 3rd morning, Ethan found footprints in the dirt outside his backyard. Not his, not Lila's, and not Ghost's. They were deep boot marks. Someone had been there in the night. That same day, Lila's grandmother received a strange phone call. A calm voice warned her that Lila had been seen trespassing on federal property and that legal action could be taken if it continued. No name, no details. They're watching us, Lila said to Ethan, her voice low and steady. They want to scare us. Ethan replied, but we're not alone anymore. And they weren't. The first article Sadie posted went live that night, subtle, factual, but powerful. It didn't name Cold Pines directly, but it included photos of the abandoned center and an outline of unethical animal testing in unnamed rural towns. It asked questions. It urged accountability. It went viral in less than 6 hours. By morning, 3 more journalists had reached out to Sadie. Wildlife activists began sharing the article. Someone even posted an old employee badge with the West Ridge logo, confirming the center had operated for years past its official shutdown. Then the story hit local media, and that's when everything changed. The mayor of Cold Pines held a surprise press conference, calling the article misleading and damaging to the town's reputation. She insisted the facility had closed legally and that no current town funds were connected to its operation. But the town wasn't convinced. People began asking questions. Old staff members came forward anonymously. Parents who'd heard whispers but never had proof began to believe what they feared years ago, that the center had never stopped its operations and that animals had been used for more than rehabilitation. That evening, Lila received an encrypted message from Sadie. Federal agents contacted me. They're launching a quiet investigation. They want to meet with you. Ethan read the message over her shoulder and glanced toward the woods where Ghost sat just beyond the trees, his golden eyes catching the last rays of sunset. He's the key to everything, Ethan said. Lila nodded. He's proof that the program was real, that it left something behind. Sadie met them later that night at a safe house just outside town. There, 2 agents from the Wildlife Crimes Division arrived under the radar. They listened carefully. They didn't interrupt. When Lila handed over the full file, one of them simply said, "This is more than we expected." And when they saw Ghost standing calm and tall behind the teens, one agent said something Ethan would never forget. He shouldn't be alive. But he is, and now, thanks to you, too, so is the truth. The following week moved like a wave, crashing through Cold Pines. What began as whispers quickly became headlines. News trucks showed up near the town square, their antennas towering like curious creatures. Satellite vans lined the roads, and reporters began knocking on doors for a place that once existed in quiet shadows. Cold Pines had suddenly become the center of a national conversation. Ethan and Lila watched the chaos unfold from a distance. The federal agents had advised them to stay out of the spotlight for now. They agreed, though it wasn't easy. Ghost remained in the forest behind Ethan's house, but not in hiding. He had become a symbol, a living, breathing reminder of what had been done in the name of research. Photos of him, taken carefully by Sadie and blurred, just enough to protect his location, had made it into every article. Wolf rescued from secret testing facility. The headlines read, "Teen duo uncovers wildlife scandal. Isolated animal forms bond with humans, exposes cover-up." But not everyone was pleased. Some townspeople believed Ethan and Lila had brought trouble to Cold Pines. A few muttered that they should have just stayed quiet. Others defended them fiercely, praising their courage and asking why local leaders had remained silent for so long. One evening, while Ethan was checking Ghost's water and fresh bandage, his father approached him quietly. "I saw you on the news," he said, his voice neutral. Ethan nodded but kept his eyes on the wolf. "You've never been the loud type," his father added, "but you're standing up for something. I didn't see that coming." He paused. "I'm proud of you." That moment stuck with Ethan more than any headline. Meanwhile, Lila spent her days organizing files, fielding messages from investigators, and helping Sadie prepare a follow-up report. But one thought kept circling in her mind: her mother. She had never fully explained why she left Westridge so suddenly. Now Lila knew the truth wasn't just about guilt. It was fear. That night, Lila sat alone on her porch with the file labeled Omega 7. She flipped through every page, every scribbled note, looking for anything that might explain how Ghost had survived when the others didn't. And there it was. Tucked inside a folded sheet was a personal log written in her mother's handwriting. Day 238. "He looks at me like he remembers everything. I've never seen an animal bond like this. I don't care what the others say, he deserves more than these walls. One day, I'll find a way to set him free." Tears welled in Lila's eyes. Her mother had saved him. Somehow, in secret, she had released Ghost. That's why she left the center. She wasn't running from the work, she was protecting it. The next morning, Lila shared the page with Ethan. She set him free, she said, her voice full of awe and sorrow. "And he survived all these years. Alone, until you found him." Ethan looked at Ghost, who now walked more steadily with each passing day. He wasn't just surviving, Ethan said quietly. He was waiting for someone to remember him. The investigation was moving quickly now. More documents surfaced. Former staff members stepped forward under protection. It became clear the Westridge facility had operated without oversight. For over a decade, quietly funded by a private firm with an interest in adaptive wildlife intelligence, the goal had never been rehabilitation. It had been control, and Ghost, whether they planned it or not, had become proof that such control wasn't just unethical, it was wrong. Because no matter what they had done to him, he had made his own choice. He chose not to hurt. He chose to trust again. He chose them. As the sun dipped behind the trees that evening, Ethan, Lila, and Ghost stood at the edge of the forest. The world was watching now, and the next step would decide everything, not just for them, but for Ghost, and for every animal that might never get the chance he had. The morning sun filtered through the pine trees, casting soft beams onto the dew-soaked grass. The forest seemed peaceful, almost untouched, but beneath that calm lay the echoes of a battle fought in silence. The fight to protect a wolf named Ghost and to expose a secret that had haunted Cold Pines for years. Ethan, Lila, and Ghost stood together near the clearing where it had all begun. The wolf's injured leg had healed remarkably, and he moved with newfound confidence. His amber eyes sparkled with a mixture of curiosity and calm trust as he looked at the 2 teenagers who had become his unlikely guardians. The federal investigation had made waves. Westridge Wildlife Rehabilitation was officially closed for good, and charges were filed against those responsible for the illegal operations. The private firm funding the project had withdrawn under pressure. Local and national wildlife organizations promised new oversight and stricter protections. But none of that mattered to Ghost, at least not yet. For him, the forest was home. The open sky, his freedom. Leela reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn collar engraved with the name Ghost. She smiled and knelt beside him. "This is yours now," she said softly, fastening it carefully around his neck. Not a cage, not a chain. Just a reminder that you're loved. Ethan joined her, offering a small handful of wild berries he'd picked earlier. Ghost sniffed the berries curiously, then gently took them from Ethan's hand. "I never imagined a walk in the woods could change so much," Ethan said, eyes bright. Lila nodded. "Sometimes the wild finds a way to reach us when we least expect it." They spent the day exploring the forest, allowing Ghost to roam freely but always staying close. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the three sat on a fallen log, watching the colors shift from gold to deep indigo. Suddenly, a soft howl rose from deeper within the woods. Ghost's ears perked, and he stood alert, his tail wagging slightly. Leela looked at Ethan with wide eyes. "He's calling to them. The others. Maybe he's not alone." Ethan smiled. "Maybe he's found a new family." The howl was answered by another, then another, a chorus of wolves greeting one of their own. Ghost stepped forward, casting a backward glance at Ethan and Leela before disappearing into the shadows of the trees. For a moment, the teenagers watched in silence. Then Leela whispered, "He's free." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Because we believed in him, because we chose to listen." That night, as the stars blanketed the sky, Cold Pines felt different. It was a town no longer shrouded in secrets but one awakened by truth and hope. Ethan and Lila returned to their homes changed, their lives forever intertwined by a wolf who reminded them all that courage sometimes comes on silent paws. And as for Ghost, he vanished into the forest wild, free, and finally home.